new overnight, actually. President Biden signing a short-term funding bill, and this is to avoid a shutdown. Obviously, the House got it through last minute, then the Senate passed it, and it's signed.
The last-minute stopgap measure will keep the government funded at its current levels for another 45 days.
Florida Congressman Corey Mills voted no on both funding bills, and he joins us now to explain why. So tell us why. And good morning.
Good morning. Well, the biggest thing is that everyone wants to try and think that we can cut our way to prosperity. You know, the reality is that of every dollar that we borrow, 67 cents goes just towards our mandatory spending. These are the things like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. And at our current spending levels that we're at right now, you got about $633 billion in interest that we will pay this year alone. That's about 10 cents of that dollar. So what we're really talking about arguing over is that additional 23 cents that we have there, of which 14 cents of that dollar goes towards our military, which I think everyone can agree, given the geopolitical alignments of Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, and the threats abroad, we want a strong military as that peace through strength deterrency. But the issue is that you've heard nothing from any lawmakers on the left or right about really tackling our GDP to national debt ratio. Nothing on economic growth strategies. Nothing on the idea that we're going to actually be able to put things in place like H.R. 1, our Low Cost Energy Act that the House passed back in February, March timeframe that the Senate refuses to take up. So we're continuing to go ahead and increase. We're spending at a rate of about $7 trillion a year while taking in only about $5 trillion in actual revenue. As a former business owner, it's simple math. Our account receivables cannot be less than our account payables. If you are, you're insolvent, and that's what we're doing as a nation. So as we create these new dollars, you're also increasing inflation, which thereby also is the invisible tax that is eliminating our middle class. So there's a lot to unpack in that.
Well, I got a question for you, Congressman. In principle, I absolutely agree with you. I believe that we should be fiscally responsible. I also understand that this process and the approach bills that you guys are saying, hey, we're not going to do a CR. We want to do the approach bills we've already sent. The Senate is run by the Democrats. The White House is ran by a Democrat. H.R. 1, all the different bills you send that are Republican almost exclusively, they're not going to get taken up in the Senate. You know that. Your speaker knows that. Where is the opportunity here? Because it seems like the process now will be to go back to these approach bills that have not been negotiated through the Senate that you know will get sent back to you. Do you feel like you have leverage at all? Or is this a principled stand knowing you're not going to win on the outcome?
Well, you know, the biggest thing is that everyone who wants to sit in the House of Representatives is worried about what the Senate's going to do in their 61 and vice versa. I was elected to the House of Representatives by the people of Florida's 7th District. I'm there to actually make and represent their will. And I can tell you the one thing we want to look at is, yes, we want to look at the fiscal responsibility, but also we told the American people in January that we will have 12 single-point legislative appropriation bills that comes out there that gets the necessary cuts, gets the necessary reforms, and actually starts looking at how do we actually invert that ratio that I talked about with that GDP to national debt. This continuation of the DC dance of CRs or omnibus or minibus, this is not what we should be doing as appropriators and legislators. We need to be able to do our job to go line by line to look at where we actually need to strengthen things, where we need to cut programs that no longer serve their intended purposes, where we can stop the weaponization of DOJ and the FBI, how we can rescope and reform. These are things that are necessary and critical for the American people, not continuing to do DC status quo.
Based on the math you laid out, I think you're arguing it's 9 cents on the dollar is where we're actually looking at cuts at this point, based on how you broke it down.
Well, you got 67 cents of roughly on mandatories, 10 cents that goes just towards servicing our debts,
77, and then 14. Yep. So it's 9,
of which about 13 cents of that 14 cents goes to
the DOD. So you're looking at 10% is what you're actually. But that's staggering when you think of our $33 trillion in debt. There's no serious attempt to actually level out our accounts payable and accounts receivable, as you put it.
Not at all, Pete. And the worst part is it's $33 trillion right now. That means on the current interest rates, you're talking almost $18.9 trillion just in interest payments over the next 10 years, meaning that next year we're going to be looking at around $700 billion just to service our interest. That's the equivalent of a DOD appropriation bill every single year just to service interest rates.
Just to pay the credit card. Let's get to the other topic this morning, because it's hard enough for you guys to get bills passed, let alone when fire alarms are going off. What's your understanding of what happened and if there will be any consequences? If you just woke up, but to provide the context, a Democrat squad member, Jamal Bowman, pulled a fire alarm while the Democrats were trying to delay the vote in the House of Representatives. He says it was an accident. He was trying to open the door. I've never seen a door that looks like a fire alarm. Congressman, your take.
Look, bottom line is this is absolute just a lack of integrity, Pete. The guy was a principal. He knows what a fire alarm is. It's been there the entire time. We all know what the intended purpose of this was. This is why instead of voting with the electronic cards, you had every Democrat sitting in the well trying to vote by a proxy card that allows you, or not proxy card, but I guess a written card that allows you to basically fill the well to be able to draw a timeout. And then you had Jamal Bowman, who likely wasn't going to make the vote, who actually pulled the fire alarm, which in my opinion is the same violation. You know, if you think about what Jack Smith says, he says that USC 18 Section 371 is about the obstruction of federal process. Well, I think pulling a fire alarm should be the felony that's actually, you know, being charged and rendered. So I've signed and co-sponsored on the Lisa McClain's bill, which censures this individual. I think that he should have some type of consequence, and I don't think that we should play the, you know, two-tier justice system where we're going to go ahead and throw our J6 guys under the bus whenever they came into the Capitol when they committed no violent crime, but yet we're going to let this guy obstruct federal process and just get away with it.
Yeah, I think that the one of the issues of the election that isn't talked enough about, but I think is definitely on the minds of voters, is this two-tier justice system. And you're right, J6 protesters, your voters, many of them sitting in jail or being hounded by the FBI in their own homes and intimidated and harassed constantly. And here we have a guy who is actually trying to interfere with an official proceeding. What does censure mean? Because I understand that Representative Maliotakis from New York has some sort of, she's trying to get him expelled, I guess. Is that different than your censure? And why aren't you guys throwing the books at this guy?
That's exactly what we're looking at, Rachel.
Given that they throw the book at Republican voters.
Well, that's exactly what we're looking at, Rachel. And again, I want to go out to a real point, which is you're talking about the weaponization, or you're talking about the FBI and DOJ going after people. That's why I voted against also this continuing resolution that continues to come up, because it would continue to fund the Jack Smiths of the world and these sham indictments that were going on against President Trump. This is the whole thing, is to look at rescope, reform, and stop these types of things. But what Congresswoman Maliotakis is doing, what Congresswoman Lisa McClain is doing, we're trying to actually look at ways that we'd have to be able to bring him before the floor to put on record that he's being censured for his activities. And I think that he needs to actually be looking at something like a felony charge where he's actually falsely tried to get our fire department to deploy out and interfered in federal process. So there's a lot to unpack. I'm still waiting on some of the facts here, but the way it looks right now with the video, it's pretty indisputable that he knew exactly what he was doing.
So you want to censure him but not expel him, or you want to expel him too?
I would be happy to expel him as well.
Okay.
There
has to be accountability.
Have you seen
we continue to talk about accountability, and we never do anything about it. Yeah. I was elected to actually get accountability and oversight. That's what we're here for.
Have you seen the video, Congressman? Because all we see at this point is an image. The video exists. Why hasn't that been released?
Well, I definitely have not seen the video yet, but I'm looking forward to seeing that. I did see probably the same thing you did, which is the still shots of him actually pulling it. But I'm sure that the Capitol Police is reviewing that as well as others, and we should hear more on that once we get back in session on tomorrow on Monday.
Really quick, there was a member of Congress who had his phone taken away during the January 6th investigations by the FBI. It was taken away from him at an airport with his family present. And so is somebody going to take, are you guys going to, in this investigation of Bowman, are you guys going to take away get his phone to see if he was coordinating with anybody about pulling that fire alarm?
Well, I would love to actually, and that's a great question. I mean, perhaps he was trying to coordinate with Hakeem Jeffries or leadership in his own side, and they were trying to basically delay and prep this. But also people like Congressman Scott Perry, he had his phone taken, wrongfully, just out of the blue off the table and then not returned for months. So we need to be able to treat this in the exact same light as what everyone else was being treated. And I think it's only fair for us to go ahead and start investigating further into this to make sure that there wasn't an actual intentional federal process interaction or attempt to try and stop the votes.
Congressman Corey Mills, thank you for joining us. Thank you for your service. Freshman Congressman, you're killing it up there, and we appreciate you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Appreciate you
Congressman.
guys.